Torrent, our loyal spectral steed. He's kind of like that hand-me-down car your dad gives you. Super useful, but with a whole list of rules on when and where you're actually allowed to drive it. Naturally, being the curious ape brain that I am, I started wondering, what if I ignored all these restrictions? What if I could summon Torrent anywhere, anytime, with no limitations? Would it completely break Elden Ring? Or would I end up realizing that Miyazaki's restrictions actually saved me from hours of unnecessary pain and chaos? Well, let's break the shackle together and find out what we have in store. Now, there were mainly two places where I really wanted to see how the Torrent performs. First being Rykard's fight with Serpent Hunter. While it's possible to fight this boss with other weapons, it truly only makes sense to fight what is essentially a gimmick boss with gimmick weapon. So how does the addition of Torrent affect this fight? Well, in a rather disappointing way. I suppose since Torrent was never intended to be used in this fight, FromSoft probably never did the animations for it. Or perhaps it's possible that being on Torrent messes up with something that is supposed to trigger the fact that I am indeed using this weapon in its intended arena. In any case, this first test left me a bit disappointed, as I had a massive smile on my face when I got on the Torrent and pulled out Serpent Hunter, which immediately went away as soon as I pressed the attack button. If you are still looking for a positive side of things, however, then I can confirm that dodging some of the more annoying attacks does become a cakewalk while using Torrent. Perhaps Torrent could be a good utility tool, but sitting on it throughout the fight is basically like setting yourself up for a failure. Now, let's move on to the second main thing I was curious about, and that is, how does Torrent fare against possibly the hardest boss of Elden Ring?
I am Malenia.
As it turns out, Malenia doesn't really know what to do, and sticks to her slow walk for the most part, while you can keep riding around her and chip away at her. I suppose she isn't really a fan of chasing her opponents. The real question here, however, is, can I outrun the Waterfowl dance? Seems like Torrent or not, Miyazaki did not want anyone to be just able to run away from this move, and so he ensured that Malenia can track you to your house to hit you if that's what it was gonna take. So running away is a no-go. What if I maybe try a different approach? Somehow bait her into chasing me, but then do a quick 180 and try to zoom through her. While not perfect, this is definitely better. Just gotta feed Torrent after each dance-off. I would assume that if you were to perfectly space the second one and then do the turnaround at the right moment, you could potentially avoid getting hit at all, making you invincible on the horseback. Obviously, that requires some precision, and if you are to time and perfectly space an attack, might as well do it on foot. While the tracking on Waterfowl was impressive and somewhat close to what I expected, the insane tracking on the Aeonia explosion never crossed my mind. So overall, the Malenia fight does become a lot easier if you can learn to space and maneuver maybe 2-3 of these attacks with absolutely insane tracking, turning this fight into more of a cheese than an actual battle while you are on your horse. And if this can be called a cheese, then allow me to show you how the fights against Placidusax and Fortisax become if you are able to ride Torrent. Now, obviously these are much larger arenas to house these much larger enemies, but if you are using some nice horseback battle tech, then both of these fights become insanely easy to deal with, and again, almost seeming like a cheese. Now, this isn't possible to do without external tools I am using, but just makes me wonder how these fights would have been perceived if FromSoft had allowed to use Torrent in these fights without needing any of these external tools. All you need is some positioning knowledge and you are set to beat them down mega easy. Mr. Bale, however, yeah, throw everything I said out the window. This trend continues for most bosses with either ranged attacks or small arenas, as the only evasive thing you can do on a Torrent is jump. So goodbye iframes. So anything that can track you decently well, or if you put yourself in bad position, you'll be off your horse very quick. The poor poise on Torrent along with not a lot of HP add to the fact that when on Torrent, you really don't want to get hit. Except for Metter. This fight, while boring, becomes very easy from horseback. And I didn't have issues dodging anything once I figured out the optimal fighting distance. Some jumps for skips do become easier, but a lot of spaces now have invisible walls, disabling any chance of forced entry on some of the bosses, as these were used before and probably were patched to avoid it from happening again. While I did my best to break free from the shackle, there were two disappointments on this journey of torrenting everywhere, which were Abyssal Woods and NPC invasions. I tried using both the trainer tools I have to no avail, and understanding the limitations of my knowledge in coding department, I couldn't find a workaround. So I guess I'll never know if I can outrun the untouchables on my Torrent. So, after riding Torrent into places he was never meant to be, I think it's fair to say I finally understand why Miyazaki put all those restrictions in place. I think he didn't want it to be anything more than just a tool to get around. Sure, in some fights Torrent felt like pure cheese, but in most cases he was more of a liability than a blessing. It was fun to break free from the shackles and see how the bosses react when I get a bit of speed boost around them. But in the end, I am happier with my feet on the ground. Next up, I am bringing you the highlights from the run I had with possibly the worst weapon in the game. So hit the subscribe button to get notified when that comes out and see for yourself if the weapon is as bad as it's said to be. Until then, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.